Hello and welcome to this month's Global in the Granite State, a program of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire. No, we are a bit late in getting this one out, and I hope you have not been too worried about us. However, this was certainly worth the wait, especially as the Middle East is thrust back into the spotlight with Israel's attack on Iran's nuclear infrastructure on June 13th. I will note that this interview was recorded prior to this attack, so we'll not address that issue. This is certainly something the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire will watch closely. For those who may not know already, the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is dedicated to helping people better understand the world around them. My name is Tim Horgan, and I am the Executive Director of the Council, as well as your host for this program. Before we get into our conversation, I want to take a moment to thank all of the donors to our New Hampshire Gives campaign on June 10th and 11th. Your donations are vital to the continuation of these amazing programs, and I appreciate your support. Likewise, thank you to all of our members, donors, and sponsors who make this world possible and valuable. We wouldn't be here without strong community support, and I call on all of our listeners to show the world the value you see in what we do by donating or becoming a member today. More at wacnh.org. A huge thank you also to our podcast sponsor, McLean Middleton, for your ongoing support of this program and others. I really appreciate your dedication to being community-based leaders and that you are a great model for other organizations to follow. McLean Middleton is one of New England's premier full-service law firms with over 115 attorneys throughout offices in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. McLean Middleton's attorneys have been providing trusted legal services to businesses throughout the region for over 100 years. Learn more at mclean.com. Now, on to the main event. I first met Fahad Nazer, the spokesperson for the Embassy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in the United States, in 2021, as we worked together to set up a virtual conversation with Her Royal Highness Princess Rima Bandar Al Saud, Saudi Arabia's ambassador to the United States. I'm pleased to work with him again as we look to better understand the U.S.-Saudi relationship, while also the challenges of the region. No matter how hard policymakers try to refocus elsewhere, the Middle East remains a major focal point of global issues, and this will not change anytime in the near future. In addition, there's a long history of U.S. engagement in the Middle East, specifically between the United States and Saudi Arabia, pretty much since the uniting of the four regions that now compose the kingdom, all the way back in 1932.
So you are right in saying that it's been 80 years since the historic meeting between modern Saudi Arabia's founder, King Abdulaziz Al Saud, and the late President Franklin Delano Roosevelt aboard the USS Quincy. But the relationship between our two countries actually goes back a little further than that. One date that's often mentioned is actually 1933, which would make it 92 years as of today. So either way, it's obviously a very long-standing relationship, whether it goes back 80 years or 90 years. Not only has it endured for that long, but it's actually continued to strengthen and to deepen and to broaden under both Democratic and Republican administrations. The relationship in many ways is multidimensional. What I mean by that is that it includes political cooperation on a number of fronts. It includes military cooperation, including regular military, joint military training, but also occasionally military operations. I think it's worth noting here that Saudi Arabia and the United States have fought not one war side by side, but actually twice. The first time was in 1990 when we fought together to expel Saddam Hussein's troops from Kuwait. More recently, going back to 2014, again, we fought side by side to expel the terrorist group ISIS from Iraq and Syria. There's also a very important dimension, economic dimension, that includes trade and investments. And that's really, in some ways, the economic dimension, the economic cooperation, the trade in goods and services, the investments, is kind of the founding. And when I mentioned the 92-year kind of a time frame, I'm referring to the time Standard Oil of California first started looking for oil in Saudi Arabia in 1933.
While that relationship has not always been smooth, defined by regional and global trends, it has endured through ups and downs. A shared interest in regional stability, confronting shared challenges, and securing energy resources has energized this partnership, while Arab-Israeli tensions, regional and global terrorism, and differing approaches to regional events have strained the relations at times. However, in light of President Trump's recent visit to the country, making Saudi Arabia the first country he visited at the start of both terms, the relationship appears strong today.
Just last month when President Trump was in Saudi Arabia, and obviously we were very grateful that the president once again made Saudi Arabia the first destination on his first foreign trip. The visit went very well, and it really, like I said, showcased the multidimensional nature of the relationship. The economic one especially really was at the forefront. So you had several agreements signed. Some of them were government to government. So we had the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of National Guard, our Space Authority, our Ministry of Culture, and our Ministry of Health all signed various agreements with their US counterparts. So that was the beginning of the visit. Later on that day, and the president was in the kingdom for about 24 hours, give or take, but there was an almost equally important US-Saudi economic investment conference. And that included hundreds of business leaders, whatever sector you can think of, all the giants were there. Whether it's Amazon, Google, Apple, Boeing, GM, GE, they're all there. And many of them signed important agreements with Saudi businesses and their counterparts. Both President Trump and the Crown Prince spoke at that investment conference. And His Royal Highness the Crown Prince said that $300 billion worth of agreements were announced during the conference. And another $300 billion worth was in various stages of conversation, and those will be also announced, we fully anticipate, in the next weeks and months. And again, the agreements ran a broad spectrum of sectors. Energy was just one of them, but all sorts of technology, especially artificial intelligence. There were a number of very important agreements signed. NVIDIA and AMD both signed important agreements with Saudi Arabia's kind of a leading AI company called Humane, which is owned by the Public Investment Fund. So it was a very successful visit. And in 24 hours, it really kind of showcased, for those of us, myself included, who obviously followed it very closely, it really showcased just that the depth and the breadth of the relationship.
While half of the agreements remain left to be confirmed, these are a continuation of the growing economic relationship between the two countries. The United States is Saudi Arabia's second largest trading partner and maintains a trade surplus of $443 million throughout 2024. This relationship seems poised to deepen in the years to come.
The reality is that the United States has been, and certainly U.S. businesses and companies have been in Saudi Arabia from the beginning. So a company, just to cite an example, like Bechtel has been in Saudi Arabia for almost 80 years. GE, GM, Pepsi, Ford have been there for decades. And now the new giants, the Oracles, Googles, Amazons, even Tesla, are all in Saudi Arabia. And we fully anticipate that, just as the old giants, if that's the right term, help Saudi Arabia move forward its initial development stages, the new giants are helping us move Vision 2030 forward. And again, we fully anticipate that whether it's, like I said, 300, 600 billion, potentially more, these are ongoing conversations. And as you know, the global economy is changing. There's many opportunities for partnership, but there's also a lot of challenges. So I fully anticipate not only that there will be more agreements announced over the next few weeks and months, I fully anticipate that there will be new agreements and partnerships that were not mentioned or were not even begun during President Trump's visit, because, like I said, that economic partnership, the business-to-business dimension of the relationship is ongoing. It's an ongoing conversation. And as I mentioned, the global economy is just changing. It's ever changing. There's so many opportunities and challenges. So, whatever the final figure is, it will be 600 billion over the next 4 years, almost for sure. And like I said, but could be potentially a lot more.
One of those major areas for growth comes in the AI sector, a field that Saudi Arabia looks to grow and leverage in the coming years.
Saudi Arabia is one of the few countries that years ago established an authority basically just to oversee artificial intelligence and to promote innovation and technology. We are firm believers not just in AI, but in all sorts of breakthrough technologies and innovative technologies. We believe that technology and science really hold the keys to meeting some of the challenges that we as a human race or an international community face. AI does have that potential. I mean, I've read up about it over the past few months, and how can you not? And I've attended a number of conferences. And so it does have the potential to completely transform the way that people live and work and even play. And we are investing heavily in it. The other dimension of that conversation that maybe sometimes overlooked, AI does require a few things. One, you need space to build the infrastructure for it. And we have that in abundance in Saudi Arabia. But I think just as importantly, maybe more importantly, it needs a lot of energy. And Saudi Arabia has an abundance of that. So I think that's a big reason why the AI giants and the tech giants in the United States are finishing and coining and completing these partnerships with counterparts in Saudi Arabia, is because of the fact that, one, we're believers in the technology. Two, we have the energy. Three, we have the space for it. So that will continue going forward. At the same time, and as I mentioned, this is a mutually beneficial relationship in the sense that some of the partnerships that were announced during the president's visit were actually American businesses doing business in Saudi Arabia. So the AMD Humane partnership, for instance, was basically NVIDIA is going to provide artificial intelligence chips to Humane. And this will obviously be very useful for us in the kingdom in terms of powering our AI sector. Short order, we're going to be leaders in the region.
Of course, the initial basis for U.S.-Saudi relations, starting with Standard Oil opening operations in Saudi Arabia in 1933, has been focused on access to oil. Saudi Arabia is one of the world's largest producers of oil in the world, a leader of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, also known as OPEC and OPEC+, and has leveraged this strategic resource for around a century to support the growth of their economy. Through the Vision 2030 program, however, the country has looked to diversify away from such heavy reliance on oil revenues, while still working to meet global demand for fossil fuels.
We will continue to produce crude oil and natural gas for the foreseeable future, for the simple reason that there's tremendous demand for oil and gas. It is about 100 million barrels a day today. Most projections see it as remaining steady over the next few years. So that demand, I think we believe that it's very important to have that source of energy for the foreseeable future. At the same time, we are making sure, and again, investing a lot of resources to make sure that it's as clean as possible. So we've adopted something we call the circular carbon economy in Saudi Arabia. It's 4 R's. I always forget one of them, and it all revolves around carbon. It includes reducing, removing, reusing, and let's see, I forgot one of them, but but you get the idea. It's also not a coincidence that Aramco, which is our national energy company, its products have some of the lowest carbon intensity products in the world. That's by design, because we are very mindful that we need to do our part in terms of not just providing energy of all sort, but we want to make sure that it's as clean as possible.
Despite the seemingly insatiable demand for oil and its derivatives, the Saudi government recognizes the need to focus on the green energy revolution for many reasons. So, even as demand remains robust for oil for now, this will not last forever, a reality that Vision 2030 recognizes.
We are investing heavily in renewable energy. We're diversifying our energy mix. We are investing and producing solar, wind, and hydrogen to meet our own domestic energy needs. So the thing about Saudi Arabia that people from the outside don't quite realize is that our population went from 5 million in 1970 to 32 million as of last year. So that's a 6-fold increase. So with that has come a tremendous increase in domestic energy needs. And so we're developing clean energy to meet some of these energy needs. And in fact, one of our goals is to have 50% of our domestic energy needs by 2030 come from renewable energy. That's one. Two, we believe that climate change is real and it poses a significant risk. and it's a challenge. And so one of the ways that we were addressing it, back in 2019, we unleashed and launched something we call the Saudi Green Initiative. And that has a number of programs. So like I said, we're moving in different tracks. Not only are we producing renewable, by the way, the long-term vision is that renewable energy will not only meet most of our energy needs, domestic energy needs, but we believe that we're going to have a comparative advantage in producing solar for sure, potentially wind, so that we will be able to export it to some of our neighbors and potentially even to Europe. And we've already had some of these conversations. So for instance, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince visited Greece last year, and that was one of the many conversations that he had with the leadership in Greece. So, like I said, we're moving in two different tracks, but they're complementary in the sense that, yes, we need to produce hydrocarbons because of the global demand, but at the same time, because of global climate change, we need to also produce clean energy because we do take that threat very seriously as well.
Of course, Saudi Arabia has wind and solar and hydro resources in abundance. The kingdom can position itself as a regional and global leader in this space, which then has positive knock-on effects, as they are able to continue producing lots of energy at low cost, which, as we have already mentioned, will have positive impacts on the energy-intensive work behind artificial intelligence. As we have also mentioned, economic partnerships have only been one leg of the stool holding up the U.S.-Saudi relationship for decades. Military cooperation has been another staple of this relationship, working in one of the most complex security environments in the world. Despite U.S. policymakers' best efforts to shift focus away from the Middle East and rely on regional partners to manage the tensions, conflicts, and other interests, these things have continually pulled the United States back into an active role in the region. As one of the United States' longest-standing security partners in the region, it is important to understand the underpinnings of this relationship.
The military relationship essentially always been a pillar of the bilateral relationship. We have no higher priority than making sure that our people are safe and our borders are secure. And we've had a long-standing relationship with the United States when it comes to military, not just cooperation, but most of our defense systems are U.S. made. We've had joint military training. We've sent many of our military cadets and officers to the United States for decades. So that relationship has been there almost from the beginning. It's continued to deepen and to broaden, and we certainly fully anticipate that that will be the case going forward. Because again, you don't need to be a scholar of the Middle East or historian to realize that unfortunately the Middle East has more than its fair share of challenges, security challenges and otherwise. And so, like I said, this is our number one priority, as I imagine it is for most nations, is to make sure that your people are safe and that the borders are secure. And the United States is our primary partner when it comes to that.
This military relationship has not been without its bumps and bruises over the years, with the United States suspending arms sales a number of times. However, these frictions have been smoothed over quickly, and military support has always resumed in due time. From the war in Yemen to Jamal Khashoggi and the U.S. sidelining of the Palestinian issue, these two countries have not always been in lockstep. But the overall need for security in the region, tied with the instability that continues to arise, always brings them back together. One of the recent changes to the overall structure of the Middle East has provided yet another opportunity for closer collaboration, which is the overthrow of Omar Bashir in Syria. In President Trump's recent visit to the kingdom, he credited Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman with convincing him to lift U.S. sanctions on Syria.
Obviously, Syria is just recovering and transitioning away from a long and painful civil war. We are very hopeful that the current transition represents a new chapter, a new hopeful chapter in Syria's history. We have been supportive of the new government. I think that they have said all the right things, and they've also taken some important measures in terms of committing to being inclusive domestically, in terms of respecting all the different factions, all the different segments of Syrian society, but they've also pledged to live in peace with their neighbors. So we believe that they're on the right course. We've been supported both politically, and we've begun to also provide some financial assistance to make sure that they make a successful transition. We are also very grateful for the fact that President Trump did announce the lifting of sanctions on Syria while he was in Saudi Arabia. So, again, these transitions are always difficult, but we certainly thought that for Syria to have a good chance of making a successful transition, the sanctions really did need to be lifted. And so we are grateful and thankful, and we're hopeful now that Syria is on the right track. And we will continue to do what we can to provide political support for sure. And we hope that the rest of the international community will do likewise.
Yet other developments in the region may strain the relationship between the US and Saudi Arabia, mainly how to approach Iran. Now, again, a lot has changed since this interview was recorded and when it was posted, as Israel began its attack against Iran's nuclear facilities, and we continue to watch as this new development unfolds. However, we do know that Saudi Arabia has pursued a cautious re-engagement with Iran, starting with the resumption of diplomatic ties, first brokered by China in 2023, after having cut ties 7 years earlier. With the Trump administration reinstituting the maximum pressure campaign in 2025, while simultaneously starting negotiations on a new nuclear deal, it remains unclear where the US and Iran are headed. Again, especially in light of the latest Israeli attack.
Iran is our neighbor. They have tremendous, certainly potential. They have a tremendous history, predominantly young people. So we restored our diplomatic relations with Iran 2 years ago, and we have a good working relationship with them now. We maintain a robust and open channel of communication. Our foreign minister speaks to his counterpart on a regular basis. We also had the most senior Saudi official visit Iran about 2 months ago, and this was the Minister of Defense. So I think we're at a good place now. That doesn't mean that we have resolved all of our differences. For people looking at bilateral relations, international relations, I think it's worth noting that if you look at the two closest allies, you take any two really close partners anywhere in the world, they're bound to have a difference of opinion over some issues. But that does not negate the areas where there's broad agreement and alignment. And so, like I said, I think we're at a good place with Iran now. And we're firm believers in, and this is what we do, not just to maintain our relationship with Iran, we do it with all countries. We always like that channel of communication needs to be open. The dialogue needs to be continuous. It needs to be robust, and we're doing all of the above with Iran. So I think the relationship is on the right track. Now, in terms of the talks that they're having with the United States, we're supportive of the talks for the same exact reasons I just mentioned. Obviously, there's tensions between the United States and Iran and differences over a number of issues. So the only way to resolve those, as far as we're concerned, is to have a frank and open dialogue. That dialogue is taking place. We're hopeful that it will lead to an agreement of some sort, because Saudi Arabia's vision for the Middle East is not just to be a Middle East or a region free of nuclear weapons. It's for the broader Middle East to be free of all weapons of mass destruction. So we're hopeful that this will lead to an agreement of some sort in the next weeks and months ahead.
Another area where the two countries are not always aligned is on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is particularly pertinent in light of Hamas's October 7th attack and the Israeli response, which continues today. This has deeply scarred the region, changed the trajectory of many regional realities, and devastated and destroyed lives. If you take President Trump at his word, there are wide gaps between his vision for a solution to this intractable conflict and how the Saudis would like to see this come to an end.
Right. So Saudi Arabia's position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been clear and consistent for years. We have argued for decades at this point that for the broader Middle East to enjoy any semblance of peace, prosperity, and stability, this core dispute has to be resolved. Not only has it brought a lot of pain and suffering to both Palestinians and Israelis, it's also been exploited by the most radical elements in the Middle East and beyond. So as far as we're concerned, the only sensible and just way forward is a two-state solution. After all, it was the late King Abdullah who introduced what is now known as the Arab Peace Initiative back in 2002 in Beirut at the Arab Summit. But that position really predates even 2002. We've been talking about a potential two-state solution going back all the way to the 1980s. But really, it was in 2002 that we presented this proposal, and it offers Israel not only normalization with Saudi Arabia, it offers it normalization with all 21 members of the League of Arab States that were at that summit and agreed to this initiative in return for a just and comprehensive agreement with the Palestinians based on a two-state solution. That, we believe, is the only way forward. But for the immediate term, and we've been calling for this for months now, we need an immediate ceasefire. We need an immediate release of all the hostages. Humanitarian assistance needs to go to the people who need it. And again, long term, Israelis and Palestinians have to resolve this politically. The last thing that the Middle East needs is more violence. It's unfortunate sometimes people who don't live in the region talk about moving Palestinians or displacing Palestinians. I think they overlook a lot of realities. They don't take into account the fact that this is the only place that they've known for all of them. This is the place they've called home for decades. So two states is we will continue to promote that because, again, as far as we're concerned, it's the only just and sensible way forward.
It is also important to note the impact that the Abraham Accords, signed in 2020, bringing together Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, have had in the region. Saudi Arabia is viewed as the next important country to bring into a normalization deal with Israel. However, significant impediments remain. Many contend that Hamas's attack on Israel was specifically designed to prevent this normalization process from going forward, and it is clear normalization is not happening at this point.
We were supportive of the Accords in the sense because we believe that they would lessen tensions in the region. So as far as we're concerned, any measures that lessen tensions, that de-escalate tensions, that provide an open channel of communication is a good thing. As far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, we do need this core conflict resolved. Our leadership has said this repeatedly, that we will not normalize with Israel unless we have a very clear path forward towards a two-state solution, towards Palestinian statehood. And unfortunately, with what's transpiring in Gaza right now, and also incidentally, it's not just the situation in Gaza is obviously horrific, but the situation in the West Bank is also getting incredibly worrisome with violence, tensions escalating. That's not the way forward as far as we're concerned. So we'll continue to advocate for a two-state solution before we talk about normalization. Obviously, we're not anywhere near that for the time being.
Now, a couple of times we've alluded to this Vision 2030 program. Some of you may have heard of it, while others may have not. But this is a very ambitious plan and something that has shown great success in revamping the economy, modernizing many aspects, and empowering various groups of Saudi society. While there remains a lot to be accomplished, the Saudi government is quite proud of where they are today.
Vision 2030, to your listeners who might not be familiar with it, was unveiled by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince back in 2016. The vision's broad objectives are the empowerment of every segment of Saudi society. It is the development of every sector of the Saudi economy. At the same time, we've completely revolutionized the way that we deliver government services. More specifically, the vision is seeking to lessen our dependence on oil revenues by diversifying the economy. So there's a number of sectors that have been developed over the past couple of years that are really completely changing in a structural, fundamental way the way the economy functions. So our mining sector is one of them. And we had our most comprehensive geological survey conducted last year, and it found that Saudi Arabia sits on top of $2.4 trillion worth of metals and minerals. So that sector has tremendous potential and will generate not only revenues, but will generate thousands of jobs and will help with the global energy transition, because a lot of these metals that are being discovered in Saudi Arabia will be critical to this transition. Two, Saudi Arabia also has a built-in advantage by its sheer geographic location. After all, we're strategically located at the intersection of three continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa. We are also on two waterways, major waterways, the Red Sea, and as we like to call it, the Arabian Gulf. And because of that, we are investing heavily in our ports, in our seaports, in our highway system, in our rail system, in our telecommunication system, so that we can be transformed into a global logistics hub, and where we can promote the transfer of goods and services and information between the global north and the global south, for lack of a better term. At the same time, we've also Saudi Arabia, seemingly overnight, but it wasn't really overnight, but we did it very quickly. We've slowly but surely becoming a global tourism destination. Saudi Arabia last year had the second fastest growing tourism sector in the world. Last year, we had 27 million people visit Saudi Arabia for non-religious tourism purposes. There was another 20 million who came specifically for tourism purposes. We fully expect this number to grow. And as this transformation has taken place, we have made sure that women are fully empowered, because after all, as is the case in many countries in the region, the majority of our population, 51 or 52%, are women. The majority of people in colleges and universities in Saudi Arabia are women. Women, by all accounts, are not only excelling in whatever sector every sector you can think of, not only are women participating in it, they're actually excelling. So whether we're talking about the diplomatic corps, starting with my own boss right here in Washington, D.C., she was the first woman ambassador appointed back in 2019, but we've had 5 or 6 other women appointed since. We have women in our Shura Council, which is basically our parliament. It's our legislative body. We have women in the security services, women in the armed services. We have women in every private sector, the entire spectrum. You have CEOs in, again, whatever sector you can think of. We have women athletes. We sent the first Saudi female astronaut to space last year, which is something that a lot of people don't know. So, like I said, as we speak, not only are women participating in every sector, in both, public sector, private sector, but they're actually excelling and helping lead Vision 2030. So in some ways, the empowerment of women is one of the goals of Vision 2030, but it's also a key to success. It's a goal, yes, but it's also critical that women be empowered for the success of the broader success of Vision 2030. And we're certainly, I think, well on our way. We've already reached some of our goals. So one of the goals of Vision 2030 back in 2016 was to increase the percentage of women in the workforce from 20% to 30% by 2030. We're already at 34% as of last year. So that benchmark, that goal is going to be moved upwards. 40% of all new small and medium enterprises in Saudi Arabia last year were established by women. And really, the list goes on and the accomplishments goes on. Not a day goes by where a Saudi woman breaks the proverbial glass ceiling somewhere.
One final area that should be explored whenever talking about geopolitics is the rising tensions between the United States and China. On one side of the debate, you have those who believe the US and China should completely decouple and build their own spheres of influence, while the other side still believes there are opportunities for collaboration on key global issues. I will let you decide for yourself which side is currently winning that argument, but it leaves the rest of the world to question whether they need or are willing to take sides in this growing competition.
So like I said at the outset, we have a long-standing relationship with the United States. That relationship will only get stronger and deeper going forward. At the same time, we also have an important and newer relationship with China, but it's important nonetheless. China is our biggest trading partner. We have a lot of important investments in China. There's a lot of important Chinese businesses doing business in Saudi Arabia. They're one of our biggest customers for oil. So we're not taking sides, and we don't want to take sides. And frankly, we don't believe that it has to be this way. They're both important as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned. Like I said, our relationship with the United States is vital, strategic on many fronts, but we have an important relationship with China. And I recall it was, I think, last year at some point, His Highness, the foreign minister, was asked that same question. And he said that not only do we not want to take sides, we don't believe it has to be this way. We would love to play the role of a bridge between the United States and China to reduce tensions and to offer our good offices. And here I'm using some of the terminology that I learned back in my political science and international relations courses. And this is incidentally something that Saudi Arabia has done for many years. So we're often kind of uniquely positioned to play the role of honest broker, not just brokering and mediating between countries, but sometimes between factions within countries. So these efforts go back all the way to 1990 when we helped broker an agreement that ended the Lebanese civil war. At that point, had been raging for 15 years. More recently, we helped broker an agreement between Eritrea and Ethiopia. We've offered to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. And we also hosted a successful round of talks between the United States and Russia just a couple of months ago that by all accounts were very fruitful, and they helped begin a conversation. The good thing is about U.S.-Chinese relations is that dialogue is still ongoing. Obviously, they have diplomatic relations, they have exchanges, and even at the very highest levels. So that's very reassuring because, again, we believe that they both play an important role in the world, and less tensions between China and the United States is not only good, I think, for both countries. It's good for Saudi Arabia. It's good for the broader international community. So we're hopeful. We see, obviously, statements that talks on a host of issues between the United States and China. But if we're asked to mediate or to host talks, obviously, we'd love to do it because we've done it, and this is what we do. The reason, like I said, that we are often viewed as an honest broker is because of the way that we conduct our foreign affairs. So we adhere kind of very closely to a set of principles that allow us to be true honest brokers. So we don't take sides in disputes. We believe in collective efforts, multilateral efforts, especially those under the auspices of the United Nations. We believe in the power of diplomacy, quiet diplomacy sometimes, but certainly in keeping an open channel of communication. We don't interfere in the domestic affairs of other countries. We don't support non-state actors, militant non-state actors, no matter their leanings. We're always supportive of internationally recognized state institutions. So like I said, because of that, nations will feel very comfortable allowing us to play that role. And going back to what I said, I mentioned Lebanon, but we've also hosted talks between the stakeholders in Sudan over the past couple of years. And that says something. And it says that, nations trust us to play that honest broker role and to just provide a venue to have that conversation, to get that conversation going. Because if you don't start talking, then whatever the dispute is, it is very unlikely to be resolved if you just don't sit down and start a conversation.
I think this is a perfect place to bring this episode to a close. The World Affairs Council of New Hampshire wholeheartedly agrees that starting conversations is vital and that jamming your head into the sand will not make any of these problems go away. We appreciate all of you who are willingly engaged in these important global conversations and hope we have provided an important role to your understanding of the world. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of The Global in the Granite State. We hope you will show your support for this global program, as well as other programs of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire. As a small nonprofit with a global reach, we need strong community support in order to continue these efforts. Please consider donating or becoming a member by visiting wacnh.org. As always, Tim Horgan is your host, director, producer, audio engineer, researcher, fact checker, and all the other things for this program. Our theme music remains admin by A.A. Alto, and our interlude music is Whip by Prez Hunkal. Thanks for joining, and join us next month as we dive into U.S.-UK relations.